Joe, such a pleasure. Thanks for joining today. I look forward to jumping into BrandGuard and everything we've done together, your expertise, how you help brands with brand enforcement. I'd love to get started by getting to know a little bit more about you, talking about the ways we've worked together, and then really digging into your expertise because you really are an expert in the area. You've been on Amazon for a long time as an Amazon seller, and you work with all sorts of amazing brands. We'll cover some of these like Bulletproof Coffee, Theragun. You've got tons of great brands we've worked with, like Yes Two together. I'm really excited to get into details. But to start, what got you started? Why do you do what you do, and what's your backstory? How did you get started with Amazon? How did you start BrandGuard?
Yeah, like most good stories, you start as a school teacher, not making enough money, and you got to figure out a way to support your family. So, yeah, Amazon started as just a side gig and an income supplement, and it was like, wow, there's a big opportunity here, and this was still pretty early days, I think, on Amazon when things were just starting to kick off, and yeah, so we just started off as a reseller, quite frankly, and we were buying products on clearance. We were buying them online where we could, and just started reselling, and that started to take off so much so that I was like, just had our first kid, and I was like, you know what, I want to stay home and hang out more with my family. So left teaching and did the Amazon gig full time, and that was going great until it wasn't. And had our second kid, and 10 days later, no lie, our account got suspended. And you're like, this is amazing. Good thing I just quit my job. And so then, we definitely had to pivot more in that direction of, okay, how do we, now we've acquired some skills in the marketplace, I don't want to run away from that and just go get a regular 9 to 5 anymore. So we really stepped into it, started helping people any way we could on Amazon, and then really went down that trail of um, brand protection was becoming this huge issue, and really, quite frankly, companies were having trouble solving the issues that sort of I was creating for them, and people like me as resellers. And so we went down that road of going, well, how do we help companies solve these problems around resellers? Because quite frankly, Amazon didn't want to. They enjoy that issue. Sort of makes their whole marketplace go around, if you will, and so yeah, it went down that road of just understanding what's possible, what's not possible, and began helping people. And then, over time, developed processes, have developed software now, and it's really turned into just a huge need that continues to exist. But yeah, so it doesn't. If you would ask me, 5, 7 years ago, where are you going to wind up? I don't think I would have guessed here, but here we are, and it's been really good working with partners like you guys on some of the brands we've been able to work together on, and just help a lot of manufacturers, brand owners that are very frustrated by this issue and don't know what to do about it.
No, and we when we look at those 3 points, we talk about the worst resellers removed, which, like you said, you started at seller, are price competing. You have the ability to get their product, but as a brand, you look at how do you restore their profitability? How do you grow their sales? What was that shift for you when you started to think brand centric and brand enforcement? Like, how did you get into that again from selling on Amazon and getting shut down to realizing there was a real gold mine to help these brands take control of their channel, do what's called map pricing, really take these resellers and take control of the market that Amazon invented, where they pit their channel against them and turn that into a sales engine where they get revenue growth and they can reclaim revenue. What was like one of the first or two or three clients that you work with? Just out of curiosity, how did that go, and what were your learnings from that?
Yeah, so I think, how do we go from being seller centric to brand centric? I think for me, it was realizing like, wow, I did get some of those nasty grams on Amazon back in the day of brands messaging me going, we're gonna shut you down and we don't want you selling our product. I'm like, I've got one unit that I picked up from TJ Maxx. I don't know if I'm gonna destroy your business, but just realizing like okay, my head is I'm just trying to make some margin on a product anywhere I can. And I remember hearing a podcast and just they talked about like, how are you adding value? Where is this going? You can't just be an order taker and that's going to cease to become to add any value to the marketplace. And so, it just got me thinking, all right, we're lining up on the wrong side of this. Like, I don't want to be fighting against all these brands that own the rights to their brands, right? That want to control it, and that's their whole business, right? So they want to protect it. Um, I don't want to be fighting against them. How do I work with them? And I think that mentality shift just had us thinking, how do we add value? How do we add value to them? And I think we saw brand protection again as a big need. How do we solve the problem we were creating? Even though
Mm.
we didn't immediately know what to do about it, we were kind of started off on the marketing side, but like, let's embrace Amazon. Let's embrace some of the things we know how to do around advertising, listing optimization, that sort of thing. And then, as we got further along, we go, you know, we're learning, we're testing out some things. We connected with some other experts in the brand protection industry to pick up kind of
Mm.
some of their ideas around what do you do about this legally and that kind of thing. And
Oh, yeah.
so a roadmap began to emerge where we started building some processes that we thought could be successful. And really then it became um, now we need to just test this out. And we had some brands that we were already working with on the
Mm.
marketing side that needed help on the brand protection side. And so we started kind of testing out our processes there, investigating these sellers, was much harder to identify who sellers were 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, right before Amazon started releasing some contact information. And then like, how do you build that legal foundation to be able to tell them, hey, you can't be doing this, so that's a whole other topic, but that's what got us down the road. And yeah, we, initially it was working with agencies like yourself that had these clients that had different issues, some of our own clients, and going, okay, hey, we're starting to make a difference. We're starting to get sellers responding, taking their products down off of Amazon. And yeah, those first few were kind of convincing ourselves that this could work. We had to prove it to ourselves, and we felt like we've developing a process that's backed by legal structure and industry experts, kind of
Led you into
speaking
it.
into it, and then okay, this is actually getting results for people. And now as we started to get those results, we were able to refine those processes over time and build out some of our own tools to make ourselves more effective. But yeah, it's always that interesting transition, right? That's a pretty big going from reseller to marketing help to like brand protection. It was kind of a wild ride, that feeling of flying the plane and building it all at the same time.
Oh, well, and I often call Amazon the drunken dinosaur. Uh, they have a lot of moving pieces. They change the game a lot. And again, they're incentivized to pit everyone against each other in their channel. Resellers create all these models, but they constantly change the rules. And that's a lot of where like the challenges exist. But when you looked at like the common early, like that minimum viable product, what were comments or some of the pain points you isolated that were really relevant to brands and really helped them have the same aha moment that you had, obviously coming from the reseller side to working with agencies, realizing that brand guard really had a market fit. What were those big pain points? What were the things that you felt like you kind of on that relates to profitability and sales?
Yeah, I think the big one back then was just who are these sellers?
Mm.
We've got no way to identify who they are, where are they getting our products from. I think that was a huge one. Um, and still in a lot of ways is, right? Like just because you do have some information doesn't mean that information's good, or it could be some random PO box or UPS store address somewhere, right?
Mhm.
So I think that was a huge piece of just who can you help me identify who these sellers are so I could stop selling to them, or, ask my distributor to stop selling to them. So that was a big piece. And then I think just, even then, and a lot of times still now, like people are, I'd say manufacturers are used to that idea of MAP enforcement, price enforcement, and that's kind of the only tool in the toolbox they have to, and they're trying to apply that to these unknown sellers. So MAP is really great when you know who the sellers are and you can easily cut them off in the distribution. But here's all these other rogue sellers. I don't know who they are, don't know where they're getting it from, and Map's not going to work. It's just using the wrong tool for the, job. And so it was kind of, how do we build a separate workflow that could actually go after these sellers and be able to communicate in a way that they would respond to. And so that was a lot of building out a legal strategy there, to then when we communicate, we're not just sending vague letters to these sellers hoping they'll take their product down. You actually had a legitimate reason for doing that. And so I think those were some of the initial things. And now, like, we moved into there's not a lot of great tools for tracking, and the tools that are out there are still more map focused. And so we've been able to pair basically a really strong gray market unauthorized seller focus and map, so that people can do that in one platform. And again, that, I think those are a few things that we've seen continue to be common pain points in the industry. And people, it's just still struggling, right, to be
Right.
successful implementing a map policy and taking down some of these gray market sellers that are just frustrating them.
That gray market is again. I know one of the clients that you've had that's a notable success story that I use their bulletproof coffee. Especially in my early days, Valley Nerd, all about the tea oil, the proof coffee, the quality there. But what was one of your experiences with this client? Like how did they come to you? How did you solve their problem? What was their experience? And again, what was their outcome at the end of the day in terms of a business result?
Yeah, so Bulletproof came to us as a referral from somebody else in the industry. They were a shipping partner that we had connected with, delivered. So they just, that was just a pain point for them, and it kind of came up in one of their conversations. One of our contacts there referred them to us, and when we started looking at them, they were winning about 80% of the share of sale on Amazon or the buy box across their brand. And, when you looked at individual products, that was literally costing them tens of $1,000s a month per product, so they're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars on the platform. And some of the kind of measures they were trying to take, like buying expensive access to customer data through their big distributor, UNFI, that was like 3% of sales for them. That was another hundreds of thousands of dollars just to try to get access to customer data to sort of triangulate who these sellers might be. Very expensive problem for them. And
Mm.
so we were able to, one, start monitoring their listing, giving them a picture, a real-time picture of their health and share of sale in the marketplace. And then, who were the sellers that were hurting them the most, because you can't get that access inside of like Seller Central, inside of Amazon's reporting tools, right? And then truly helping them identify those sellers so that they could either, one, take steps to cut them off, or two, we're communicating out directly to them so that those sellers are taking their products down. And so I think they actually win the prize still for the quickest onboarding. Like, they already had some of the right policies in place. So we were up and running in like 1 week. And within about 4 to 5 months, we helped take them from 80% buy box to 95% plus buy box across their brand. And they're still a client. They've been one of our longest tenured clients, over 4 years now, where their buy box trails between 95 and 98% on Amazon. And so, it's not just, can you solve it one time, but can you keep them at a healthy place? And we've been able to do that, which I think just speaks volumes to like the quality of the work that we're doing. But more importantly, are we creating success stories? Are we creating transformations for these guys where now they can, they're not having to compete. They're not having to drop their prices down, right? They're not struggling to run promotions on Amazon, Prime Day deals, all that good stuff, right? And so it's just helped produce a lot healthier channel for them and a lot less conflict in their other channels like brick and mortar retail and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and to that end of like map pricing, reseller agreements, and really forcing those policies, like you said, the long term to maintain that channel. What do you feel like people miss? And I think of an example just to tee it up of one of these big brands in retail where they're used to going to retail. They're used to having a channel, but they don't realize they're missing out on all this revenue that's just on their books. And it's not that they're not making money, but like, where do you see a lot of those misconceptions when it comes to, is map pricing enough? I don't need to be on Amazon. I don't need to manage this channel. People miss the ball or don't have a conception of what's possible.
Yeah, well, I think for a long time, right? You didn't ever have to worry about online channels, right? You're especially these kind of older companies, they're used to brick and mortar retail, they're shipping pallets, and that was simple, right? They understood that. And now, with the Amazon channel, it's this a lot of ways a shift to more direct to consumer. And that's just a different game than many more established manufacturers are used to playing. And it has its own nuances and challenges, right? Amazon itself versus even other online channels is vastly different. And so I think a lot of manufacturers struggle with just not knowing what to do about it, not having expertise there, and they try to treat even the ones that do try it, they try to treat it like any other channel. And just from a sales and marketing perspective, they get they keep running into lots of brick walls, right? And frustrations around that. But I think in a more holistic business sense is companies struggle with making sales and e-commerce or online sales, like traditional and online sales, cohesive strategy there. They kind of treat those as separate teams and separate silos, and a lot of times we see a lot of internal political conflicts, of like, the e-commerce team wants to get credit for sales, and the sales team, they want their commission checks, and so there's just a lot of like conflict of who gets benefit, who gets the credit for the sale. And so I think we try to encourage at least like, hey, you guys are on the same team. How do you build a unified strategy around let's call it commerce? It doesn't have to be e-commerce versus retail, but hey, we're all on the same team here. How do we develop a healthy strategy for online and retail so they don't conflict and they can play well together, right? And you can actually maximize both channels. Like, we don't have to say either or here. And so I think one piece of that is your sales strategy, your discounts, promotions, all of those things. A lot of people think they run those and like, oh yeah, I gave my distributor partners a great deal, and now that drove sales at the end of the quarter. Yeah, it did, to resellers who just flipped that all on Amazon, and so now you thought you were building up your retail channel. Really, it just got reapportioned over here, and you think you made all these sales, but really that they just got cannibalized by the online channel. So I think there's that piece of just seeing how channels work together. Or, hey, we did this liquidation event. I just shipped a bunch of product to TJ Maxx. Great, it's off the books. Except, and this was the case with Yes too, right? They liquidated a bunch of inventory and it all came back in a lot of that was sort of end of life or nearing expiration, but it came back on Amazon as brand new. So you creates a lot of issues with consumers being unhappy. I got a nearly expired product or something. So I think that's a big misconception, is just how markets connect. They're all interconnected these days, right? They're not separate silos.
Well, and like you said to the yes too, the CMO came to us. She was frustrated because all these outdated products that were no longer in her product selection were being on the front page of Amazon. They were being resold. and some of them were fraud, some of them were expiring. So it creates a whole customer experience issue. And she wants to promote her new vision for the products and the brand, but 400 plus resellers who are just pricing it however they can make profit, which again, I feel the plight of those people making that were, sending desist letters that were changing rules on. But if you're a bottom line executive, you need to take control of your channel. And if you want to market your best products, how do you control the channel, convey your value, and maintain a good profit in the process so you can control sales? And for a lot of these, like yes, too, they're 33,000 retail. They didn't realize how much of the data they were missing out on. So as an advertiser, we could show them closed loop return on investment. We could show them where their customers were buying, how much repeat purchase they have. They were missing the boat on a lot of that data that lets them not only drive more profit, but make more product driven decisions on what's going to drive the market, their innovation, their competitiveness. And I think back to when I first learned with Universal Beauty, with this brand Van Wagen, they had all these legacy listings and they were losing thousands of dollars a month just because they weren't controlling that channel. And so simply by taking control, cease and desisting, creating, keeping in good behavior with their resellers, shift the game, basically a percent buy box where they weren't getting any of the revenue upside to 90% plus. So I like to look at like why is the buy box important? And there are some stats where up to 90% of the sales go through the buy box. And this is one of the big things I think you do for brands is you help them take control back of the box. But I remember talking with the CMO of Yes2, and it was hard to explain what buy box was. For these old consumer goods, it was like, why am I not getting the sales? What is buy box? And in terms, I think we're used to it. Box is where you pit all the resellers to get the lowest price, benefit, and customer. How do you explain buy box to some of the executives that are learning Amazon or don't get what Amazon is there? How do you make that make sense to them when another seller joins your listing or your pricing isn't competitive or you have poor account health, all these issues that go into it? How do you make that simple? I know you have this 87% client buy box. So you solve this problem, but for brands that don't get it yet, how do you help quantify the revenue they're missing? And like, what is buy box for kind of CPG, old school consumer marketer that figure out this on e-commerce?
Yeah, so one of the ways that we've explained it is like Amazon is set up like if you had 30 sellers all on the same street corner selling your products, competing on nothing but price, right? Like that's how an Amazon listing is established, gives people, it's one spot where multiple people will list their offering. And then, that buy box is the coveted add to cart button, right? Who gets the sale when somebody adds to cart? And so that gets shared, that real estate gets shared. And there's, obviously multiple factors that go into who wins that spot and the 90% share of sales. But it's generally one of the biggest factors is price. And so if I've got 30, 50, I've seen 170 sellers on one listing before, that's a lot of sellers on one street corner. And they have your product and how are they going to differentiate? They're not, right? The only lever they have to pull really is pricing. And so Amazon, the way it's structured, fosters a lot of price competition, fosters that, because at the end of the day, what do they want? They want the most amount of products on the site and they want the cheapest prices. So how do they do that? Hey, let's let these sellers fight against each other to get that one spot and that 90% share of sale. And so that's some of the ways that we've kind of helped bring that to something that maybe a little easier to understand for retail first brands, right? And they just never had to worry about that before in the old world, right? Before the e-commerce jump.
Game. No, and so when and they want these sellers removed from my listings. How do I get started? What do they do? How do they figure out how to quantify or get started? How do they get rid of these pesky resellers, which we've both been, and you have passed?
Yeah, so I think often the first thing is visibility, right? They need help quantifying how big of an issue is this. And so we
Mm.
offer something called a reseller market report, where we can take a look at Amazon, we can take a look at Walmart, eBay. It's not just Amazon anymore, right? Where this is an issue. More and more sites are moving to marketplaces. Now, still, Amazon is the 800-pound gorilla. So we help with quantifying that across their brand. And we have a couple different tools that we use that can show, like, hey, here is your estimated sales across individual listings and across the brand as a whole. And then here's, based on what we're seeing, here's the share of sale that some of those different sellers are getting. So we have some tools now that can help run those reports on the front end and get I won't call it perfect data, but at least a good head start to quantifying this issue for them, and even what particular sellers might be costing them. And usually that, from that conversation, now they can get a better idea of where are we at today? How big of a problem is this? Does it make sense to throw resources to solve it? You can't have the solution cost more than the problem. But I think it's also helpful for manufacturers to recognize in our interconnected marketplaces that it's not just how much volume you're doing on Amazon that's an issue, right? It's more and more retail buyers are looking at what's happening on Amazon. The next time you go do that pitch to Target, right? Like, and Target goes, hey, I can't sell your product because it's so cheap on Amazon. That's not just an Amazon only issue anymore, right? That's millions of dollars you could be losing out to expanding in retail. So, or current retail partners that are looking at Amazon going, hey, I can't offer it and make any money at that price. And so it can threaten your current retail relationships. So, those are some additional considerations outside of some of the ones we've already brought up that it's good for people to think about. And again, makes it not just the e-commerce team's issue, right? Like, this can affect the whole organization. So that's usually a really good starting point, is just helping understand and quantify the size and scope of the problem to then help us know, okay, what makes sense as where do we go from here to solve it.
100%. And I'd say your free protection audit quantifying the value of lost revenue. We worked with one of these big companies that, again, is in the electronics. They're leaving 2 to 3 million a year on people. Again, they're making money somewhere, but it's not on their books. Quantifying and giving numbers in the red is a great way for economic decision makers recognize what they're doing wrong, could be controlled. And like you said, that kind of downwind, like, hey, if you want to sell to retail, they're going to negotiate against you on price, and Amazon pricing and not controlling it can have unintended negative consequences. But when it comes to the brass tacks, how we legally remove these sellers? I know that's, as a lawyer, we look at that. I remember trying to figure out what is the real difference. Why can people do this with the right to first sale? How do you actually get them legally? And what are some of the lessons you learned early on? How lets you, really execute this strategy, great results market.
Yeah, so I think you brought up a couple of the key buzzwords, right? First sale doctrine being, this is something I became a mini legal expert as a reseller when I got those first kind of nasty grams from these companies. Like, can they really tell me I can't be selling their products? And so I started doing some digging, some Google searching, and yeah, the idea of the first sale doctrine in the US is a part of copyright trademark law that says, if I buy the product legitimately, I can essentially resell it where I want to. It's not illegal, And so that's kind of the base level protection for resellers that's in place. Now, that was written long before markets like Amazon existed. And so in the last 10 or 15 years, there've been these important court cases that have established exceptions or ways to overcome that first sale doctrine defense. And
Mm.
that's what we would refer to as material difference exceptions is one of the main ones. There are some others. But if you can show how your sale of the product or sales from your authorized distributors, dealers is different, materially different from what these unauthorized sellers can offer consumers, then you have a case for trademark infringement. And so those differences could be there's something physically different with the product, like the packaging. We see this a lot with maybe if you distribute overseas and you've got different packaging, labeling, and it comes back to the US. Okay, that's something called parallel imports. That's a physically materially different product. And then more often than not, it's the kind of all the other ones, they call them non-physical, right? That's the other bucket, but basically warranties, quality control standards, customer service, ability to recall the product. If you can't reach out to these sellers, you don't know who they are to get them to take down their bad batch, right? So there's about 50 different possible examples there. The good news is the bar is pretty low. Court cases have shown if you can even show you have one material difference, that could constitute trademark infringement. And that's just because there's a lot of confusion still as to when I go on Amazon, I buy a product, who am I getting it from? Is it Amazon?
Mm.
Is it the brand? Is it some random third-party seller, right? I still don't get it because it all says ships from Amazon.com, right? So it's still very confusing for a lot of consumers. And so they think they're getting the product just like I'd get it from the manufacturer. But if that product was used, that product was liquidated, right? Like that product doesn't come with the same warranties necessarily. You're not getting the same product. And so, that's the angle that we've been able to take. And it's obviously not just something that we're making up. We're seeing more court cases where brands are taking sellers to court and winning on the basis of these material differences. We had a coffee brand recently, not Bulletproof Coffee, but they actually got sued by a seller as they were reaching out to him, trying to handle this offline. They got sued by that seller, but they were able to show how that seller was defacing their product to sell on Amazon, and they won the case, and was able to win a clear judgment against that seller. So kind of shot himself in the foot. I don't know why he'd bring the case, but anyway, these laws are, even if Amazon's not willing to do anything about it, the US laws are protecting manufacturers to a greater degree. And that's the angle that we're using to then go after. And really, a lot of our process is just efficient communication at scale with sellers to get them to take their product down so you don't have to go through a lot of expensive legal action. But we're doing it the right way along the way. If you did need to take a case to court, like you have a much higher chance of success because we've put all the right protections in place early on so that you were building the case.
Yeah. And unfortunately, Amazon doesn't step in here. They've got great lawyers to say plausible deniability. And as my business partner will joke, you can sue a ham sandwich in America. So it's a tough market out there. But when you look at like MAP policy violated, how do you help them? I mean, working with legal counsel, you gave some examples, utilizing seller insights, enforcing against the, but look, what are those details lists that again you really feel like are the not the silver bullet, but like what can we do if Amazon won't do anything for us? And again, I think that's where BrandGuard shines. But what just dealing with those issues of the legality and the lawyers. How do you do that without getting lawyers involved? Cease and desist are great. We love them. But what are tools and how do we do this given that Amazon doesn't seem to care?
Yeah, so I think one, lawyers are great, but only deal with them when you have to, right? And
That's it.
so yeah, exactly. So they're great to bring in on the front end of this when you're needing to set up kind of that initial legal policies, the wording around cease and desist communication. And we've kind of vetted a couple really good partners that we feel good about. And we tend to refer all of our clients to them because it's hard to find good lawyers. Sorry to any lawyer friends listening to this. But so they're good there, and then they're good at the end if you have to bring them in for a couple really, egregious sellers that are not listening to anything you've sent them. Yeah, like bring in lawyers at that place. They can communicate directly. Now it's more serious. We're getting a letter from a law firm. That tends to get more people's attention. And yes, they could escalate that to a lawsuit. Now, we've worked with over 150 manufacturers at this point. We've seen 4 or 5 lawsuits. It just usually doesn't make business sense to go that route. But sometimes it does, right? We had one case where a well-known beauty brand was losing over $600,000 in sales in a 90-day period to one seller. Okay, maybe spending 10 or 15 grand on a lawsuit might make sense in that case, right? But more often than not, you've got that kind of messy middle where you've got 50, you've got 100 sellers, and I can't afford to bring the lawyer in on all of those, right? Because I knock 5 down, 5 more come back up. So how do we have an efficient process to consistently communicate with these sellers so that they take their products down without having to get into expensive legal action? So that's what our kind of core service was. We also, not only do we bring kind of the legal help and the monitoring to as a part of the solution, but also we bring the team to help kind of become a partner with your team, and we can help consistently enforce. Well, now we've actually built out our platform to where now we've been able to offer that to teams that do maybe have the manpower in-house to maybe they have somebody that is in a brand protection or a map control role, and now we can offer kind of our tools and processes for them to take that more in-house. And we still like that idea of like done with you. You're never left alone. We can provide a strong support function, but now basically we give away the whole house in terms of how we're doing it. But your team is running it. And ultimately, if you're going to be successful, you need those 3 factors. You need a platform that's going to help you monitor all the data and the resellers. You need a process so it's consistent. And we have a separate workflow for unauthorized sellers versus MAP. Those are 2 very different things. And then, who's going to stay on top of it and manage it? And so if you've got someone in-house, great. Like if you don't have that, we've been able to bring in our team to kind of as that support and enforcement function. And so we're seeing people being successful with just our tools now, and they're managing and running it, and they're getting some of the same results. So that's really encouraging, right? Is like, hey, this isn't just us anymore. It's the tools that we've built are enabling people to be successful, which is it's pretty fun to see.
Well, and like you said, there's a lot of opportunity where the legal arm is the kind of the last resort, but in very small circumstances makes sense. But with your tools and with cease and desist and a process and changing your legal agreements and doing the subtle things, you actually can mitigate a lot of that cost and really take control. And yet people, if they do research, they're going to come back and say, how do you brand gated? And I get this a lot, how do we get the proverbial silver bullet?
Silver bullet.
But no, but they only do this because of the biggest brands at Amazon. And, we're ad partners. I love them, but they won't, there's no pull, there's no secret to get that done. And more often than not, as you say, 99% of the brands no. So why is that? What's going on there in your opinion?
Yeah, man. Everybody, when they come, they want an easy button, right? We're all looking for the easy button. Here, what's the one thing I can do? And it's just all going to magically go away. And a lot of times that idea, somebody heard the term brand gating somewhere. They saw an article somewhere on a Google search, and they're like, that sounds like what I need. How do I get that? And you're right. It was a little bit of that was happening kind of pre some of the new tools that Amazon has rolled out, like brand registry and transparency and Project Zero. So, there was a short window before that happened where some people were like working with internal Amazon teams and could get access to a brand restricted. and at least temporarily for a few products or something like that. And so that was where the term brand gating came from. But that was like late 2016, early 2017, where that was some of that was happening. And like you said, we could see some examples of really big brands like Apple, where they cut a deal with Amazon to where Amazon's policing the refurbished stuff and the used stuff now, right? You're not Apple, okay? Nobody's Apple. And so even Nike, I'll bring Nike as an example. They tried to do a deal where Amazon was going to help them better clean up the channel and protect their brand, and it just didn't happen. It didn't work. And so Nike decided, hey, we're going to leave Amazon. Well, it didn't mean that people stopped selling Nike products, right? The third-party sellers were happy to fill in the gap. And so just because you decide to leave Amazon or decide not to participate in Amazon does not mean your products will not show up there. And so I always like to ask, do you want to have control or not? Like, do you want to drive the conversation and the value around your customers are getting and their experience of your product? Or you want to leave that up to somebody you have no clue who they are and what they're doing? Those are the kinds of questions that manufacturers need to be asking themselves to drive that conversation internally. And yeah, you're going to have to get a little uncomfortable trying some new things. But at the end of the day, nobody's going to care about your brand like you will. Amazon's not going to do it. These third-party sellers aren't going to do it. So you've got to really take control of that. And there's not magical easy buttons. There's some tools that work in certain use cases. We talked about some of Amazon's programs. We can get more of that in a minute, but there is no silver bullet. And so that's why we're talking about things overall business health, like the health of your distribution, the health of your promotional strategy, the health of being able to set up holistic legal strategies. Those are kind of things that are going to help protect your business in the long run. It's not necessarily a quick fix. Sometimes fast change does happen, and that's awesome. But overall, we're like, hey, a year from now, we want you to have a really healthy business. What are some steps we can take now to better get you there? And so I think those are sometimes companies just want the shortcut. And there's other people like, hey, we can just use brand registry and knock all these sellers off. That sounds really nice, right? But you don't see like companies getting sued because of false counterfeit claims and those kind of things happening. So anyway, I think that's the frustrating thing, but also it's it's just the reality that this problem didn't happen for a lot of manufacturers overnight. The solution is not going to be turn on overnight. You're going to have to take some steps to get to a healthier place.
Yep. And for what it's worth, I will say there is an easy button in Guard. You guys make it way easy than it has to be. But if clients think it's a whole day, good luck. It does take weeks, a few months, maybe to change their game, but it's so worth it. The is there, the upside there, you get the business data, you can get the revenue back, the profitability. And I guess in closing, what are the 5 things that you think you need to have to really get a successful brand enforcement strategy? Just in closing, to leave the audience with some, key, so how to do this and what's the next step on link below to I'll call with you and get that free audit, define the revenue, define the path, but yeah, just simplify this for them in conclusion.
Yeah, I think, first off is, again, as a reminder, just recognizing all of your channels are connected. And so, we need to be thinking about overall strategy so that your channels work well together and you're maximizing all of them to see your business grow, your retail and your online channels. I think the biggest thing that most people miss is you can't just throw a MAP policy at this issue. They're kind of 2 separate things. You have to, a MAP policy is great for, again, your authorized retailers and keeping them playing by the rules, but you've got to have a separate strategy for the unknown, unwanted. You can't cut them off easily, those unauthorized sellers. And so having an authorized resale policy and taking a more trademark infringement angle from a legal strategy is really important. And then, I think the other thing is just consistency, right? You can't be wishy-washy on this. Like, if as long as you're consistently policing this, your brand will get a reputation in the marketplace as somebody who stays on top of this, and you'll start to see less and less resellers testing you, right? A lot of times our clients, that number of new sellers goes down over time because word gets out that they're serious about policing their policies. It doesn't work if you have you've got policies in name only and you do nothing to enforce them. People, you get that reputation as well, right? Oh, they have a map policy, but the pricing's all over the place, right? And so I'd say just it's worth biting the bullet and at least exploring, hey, what does it look like to get it? Do we want just chaos to reign and we'll just stick our heads in the sand and hopefully this issue goes away? I think we all know that it never works that way, right? And so it's worth it to kind of go, hey, how can I at least get a little more information? How big of a problem do I have? Let's quantify it. Then you can decide whether it makes sense to take any steps to solve it or not. And ultimately, the long-term goal is not just do you have a bigger business, but do you have a healthy business? And I think that's what we want to help see more and more brands and manufacturers get to.
Awesome. Well, Joe, thank you for your time. Great content. Excited to and continue partnering with you in ways we can help brands really manage their channel. Especially so I can advertise them on Amazon. But again, you get the market, you understand challenges. I applaud you for all the work you've done and look forward to connecting here. And yeah, let's keep the communication going. Thank you so much for your time. So I'll call it here and thank you everyone for watching.